Cool. So thank you so much for joining us today. By way of introduction, I'm Becky. I co-chair the British Interactive Media Association's Inclusive Design Council. And we have been running an Inclusive Design Award for the past 2 years now. And in particular, in this year's round, we really wanted to shine a bit more of a light on the entrance because there was some really great stuff in there. So we are hosting a mini-series to essentially delve into all the award entrants, understand what good practice might look like, and hopefully inspire people for the next round. I'm joined by Eve, a wonderful council member that we have. But I thought we could kick off by learning a bit about your roles and what you do.
Hi, I'm Puja. I'm a user experience designer at ELSE, and I've been working here for 2.5 years. But I also got to have a 6-month placement here as well during university. So I've had really great exposure to the world of experience design and have had the opportunity to work on a large range of projects with different clients, and also had the opportunity to participate in the R&D scheme that we have here as well.
And I'm Struan. I'm also an experienced designer at ELSE. I've been at ELSE for a similar amount of time, about 2.5 years. I've also worked on a range of different clients and had the pleasure of working with Puja over the past 2.5 years on Instinctively.
Okay, let's get into it while we're here. So we're here to talk about your Inclusive Design Award entry, Instinctively. Essentially, if you could just talk about, how was the project born? What influenced to kind of make the project what it is today?
When we both joined the company, there was already a project underway around dementia and music. Both Puja and myself have had a lot of experience at university working on projects in the healthcare sector. So, through personal experience, I've got a granddad living with dementia. Most people know of someone that's living with the disease or is going through the process of being diagnosed with the disease. And through a body of research that lasted about 6 months, we pivoted from designing for music, because that's something that's already done quite a lot at the moment. We started to look at habits and the importance of creating habits and routine, especially for people who have just been diagnosed with dementia, in order to sort of give them that repetition that they need on a daily basis and help guide them through some tasks that they might, be struggling to accomplish alone.
And also for me, my grandma was living with dementia at the time, and I was acting as a secondary carer for her. So when I joined ELSE and I heard about this project, I really wanted to get involved, and also wanted to pivot towards something that had a bit more of a practical application, because it was very clear to Struan and I all of the issues that arise from that dynamic of a carer and a person living with dementia, and how difficult that space could be. And we wanted to look at ways in which we can improve day-to-day living. So that's how we started to look into memory, how memory loss occurs. We learnt about this thing called procedural memory, and this is something where you act out of instinct. So think about things like riding a bike or brushing your teeth. They're things that you don't have to think about. And it was through our research that we learnt that procedural memory is the last thing to leave you as your dementia advances. And we saw some real value in that. And in addition to this, we were also looking at habits and how habits form. And there is the habit loop, and that can be used to reinforce memory and, in a way, reinforce procedural memory. And that's how the idea of Instinctively was kind of born. We wanted to look at the ways in which we could start to either strengthen existing habits or reintroduce them into people's daily routines, and make sure that the repetition means that people can stay independent for longer with tasks of living, such as what have we had so far? Making a cup of tea.
It could be a routine around, waking up in the morning and the steps involved that they need to do in a sort of sequence. So that might be, getting dressed, brushing your teeth, making breakfast. It could also just be used as a way to remind the person living with dementia to get in contact with their family. So at times, they can be quite isolated, and using Instinctively as a method of prompting them. So yeah, that's sort of how it was born. And then off the back of that, we started to look at areas for funding and ways that we could progress the project further. we found that Alzheimer's Society run an accelerator partnership once a year where they select sort of 5 or 6 different ideas and invest some money, and as well as the funding, you get the possibility to work with them over the course of a year to try and bring something to life, which is really where the project began to accelerate, because we had access to a lot of resources and people living with dementia and their carers that we could speak to and progress instinctively from there. Traditionally, when we work on the sort of client projects that we do, we understand the audience quite well. You know, we do a lot of background research and going into sort of user testing and things, we already know what we're expecting from the user group. Whereas with people living with dementia, it ranges so much from person to person. There isn't one size fits all for them. So even going into the project with lived experience on both of our sides and working with Alzheimer's Society, we kind of had to go back to the drawing board and see how we were going to make sure that people were involved in the process of the development of Instinctively throughout.
And what we found early on is that we're working with a vulnerable group of people, so we had to be very careful with the way in which we try to approach them. So prior to our engagement with the Alzheimer's Society, we were focusing more on community groups and experts in the area to try and get their opinions towards our idea and to gain advice that way. And then the idea was that once we had this partnership with the Alzheimer's Society, that would open the doors and also our credibility to then speak to people with those lived experiences and get those more fruitful insights. But I think the main thing that has helped us hone into the idea of Instinctively itself is to involve people as much as possible right from the beginning. We were talking to people who have worked on projects around dementia, people who are involved in carer groups, people who work with medical devices and how to get that accreditation, and getting that holistic understanding helps us to understand what is required for that product to be successful and actually work for that end user.
I really love this idea of working with people throughout the project, and I think you touched on it a bit, where we can often have our own assumptions, and sometimes when we go and conduct research we can be a little bit biased in terms of trying to get specific answers out of people. I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more around how you went about actually bringing people into the project. What types of research were you conducting? Was it more kind of questions and interview style kind of question answers, or was it observation? Did you take ideas to people and get feedback? We'd love to hear a bit more about that.
So the first thing we ever did was a set of interviews with experts in the area, and we had just a very simple presentation deck outlining this idea that we had, which had been born out of all of the desk research that we'd conducted up till then. And that was a great way for us to just get verbal feedback, and we'd track the things that people were saying on Miro, and we could use those insights to start looking at what we should be, furthering the concept with, and what needs to be left behind or doesn't actually make practical sense. As the product became more sophisticated, we started creating actual prototypes that people could start to look at and get a bit more of a visual understanding of what we were trying to achieve there. And now we're at the point where we have a working app that we can get people to download on their phones and try out. And we're currently in our second round of testing with a group of participants, doing a 6-week trial to get that in-depth feedback around what's working with this app. And but throughout, we've used a range of different techniques. We've done interviews, we've had conferences that we've gone to and talked to people. We visited people in their homes to chat to them about what they do on a day-to-day.
Yeah, I think the conferences and that partnership with Alzheimer's Society really enabled us to then start seeing people, face to face, getting the prototype in their hands. The conferences that we attended, we formed kind of relationships with some of these people living with dementia that were traveling from outside of London to come to these dementia specific events and almost act as sort of spokespeople for the dementia community. We were able to bring them on a journey with Instinctively as it's progressed. So We've had monthly sort of co-design workshops with some of the other partners that have been working with Alzheimer's Society, where we can test things. And it's been quite refreshing from going from quite professional client meetings, presentations, to then having some people living with dementia shouting about how the colors you're using aren't very visually nice. But we've had a lot of learnings throughout, and I think it's that it's been the blend of sort of the desk research and hosting workshops and webinars online with that face-to-face communication and just sort of building some rapport with these people that has helped to get the app to where it is now.
Yeah, there's something really nice about being around humans when you're doing something that's human-centric, right? And I think it's easy to forget that. I'm really keen to, you kind of alluded to some things there as well, but was there any kind of downsides to opening up to being more kind of co-design in your project? And were there any times where there was kind of contrasting opinions that were coming from different people or different user groups?
I think as well, having these close relationships with the people living with dementia, we got to know their personality types. And of course, as soon as you start developing something for particular people, then you get the biases creep in. We had some people living with dementia who had worked in the tech industry in their during their career, and therefore had a better understanding of technology, phones, how to use them. But you do also still get people that aren't, receptive of using smartphones, and there's been a lot of making sure the design is both complex enough for the people that have that tech competence versus the people that barely use a smartphone now.
I'd also say from our first round of testing, we came up with this massive list of features that we wanted to add into our next iteration. And what you very quickly understand is that you can't fit everything in. And I think sometimes that is the downside of co-creation. It unveils so many insights, and then it's really hard to pick which ones to focus on. And another thing that it highlighted for us, which we already knew, but it just reinforced it, is the fact that everyone's experience with dementia is different. And so for us, it was our opportunity to look again at our audience and refine it a bit further and try to be a bit more specific with who we're trying to target, because we could create this really complex product which tries to serve absolutely everyone, but then it does a lot to not a great extent. So right now we're trying to work on something where we have a core idea and it's quite basic, but it works effectively, and then we can build up again from there.
That's really great to hear, and because it is an interesting point, because there's so many different intersectionalities that come to play, and then how do you handle that and prioritize that? So my question will probably be the opposite in terms of co-design. What kind of positive takeaways have you taken from co-designing, if there are any, and how does that impact your view on the creative process as a whole?
This topic space requires a whole lot of empathy. There are a lot of problems that go on for people living with dementia and their carers. And so for us, co-creation was so essential so that they felt heard, and that we were actually going in the right direction and creating a product that deserves to exist and will actually, improve someone's life.
Yeah, I think as well, because the nature of dementia, it's difficult to get people interested in being involved in the testing. Having the co-creation element meant that we had brought people on this journey throughout the development of Instinctively. It meant when we got to the stage where we were able to begin testing, we had people that knew the product and wanted to get involved. I think that was hugely beneficial because it meant that we could get testing as soon as possible.
I wanted to zoom in on, was there like a particular moment or a particular point where you changed something in the process or around the product or the idea that really stands out to you as being driven by co-design?
Yeah, we were discussing this earlier. I think we were talking about all of the features that came about as a result of the co-creation. I think the one thing that stands out was around the complexity of the features. So originally we'd envisioned this kind of helper app that would guide you step by step through the process of making, a hot chocolate, taking the dogs out for a walk. But we refined the types of steps that you can have to habitual tasks, which might be something like taking your medication, those sort of things that happen on a daily basis. But we also included the functionality for something called suggestions, which are a bit lighter hearted. It's more, suggestions of things you might want to do. So it could suggest you to do your daily Wordle. It could suggest that you drink a glass of water, or take a minute to stand up and go outside and get some fresh air, bringing these moments of delight back into their day, as opposed to just having this solely functional app that helps guide them from step to step.
The product has evolved a lot in the past year. Even the navigation, we've dialed that back a lot. We've made sure that the text is really large for accessibility, that there's nothing that's not needed on the screen, that we use very simple language, that the buttons have a line under it as a text button, because that's what people of that demographic are used to. And I think every element of this product has been tailored based on that feedback.
Yeah, I love that, and the fact that it kind of makes it that bit more flexible in terms of the step-by-step instructions versus the suggestion. It means it can kind of tailor to that person. I think that's really nice. So I guess what's next for Instinctively? What's coming up? You said you're in your second round of research. Where do you see it going?
So our research, just started again. This is an exciting point because Instinctively has evolved into a second iteration, and it now allows the carer to be able to upload tasks as they go throughout the process, which wasn't possible before. So we're excited to see what people decide to create, and it also allows the fact that you have control over that means that there's a bit of trial and error around people understanding what Instinctively is actually most useful for in a day-to-day life situation. So we're looking forward to seeing the results from that, and we're just continuing to recruit. One thing that we have found with this demographic is that recruitment is very difficult for a number of reasons, but especially people living with dementia. There are a lot of things that can come into play, which means that they can't commit to something like testing, especially when it is 6 weeks long. So we're looking at, in the future, potentially expanding our user group and who we're targeting this towards.
Yeah, just to add to that, our agreement with the Alzheimer's Society has just come to an end. It's been a great year with them, making progressing Instinctively as far as we have. So now that agreement's over, we're looking at other avenues for progressing Instinctively. We've got our R&D days, which happen every other Friday, and we're using those to progress the testing, as Puja said, but also beginning to look at other streams and ways that we can take Instinctively to the next level.
Great. Thanks for talking us through Instinctively. We actually wanted to learn a little bit more about the R&D days that you have. They sound great. We've not heard much about this before. And we have welcomed Dave with us to tell us a little bit more. So Dave, do you want to introduce yourself and then maybe give us a bit of a lowdown on R&D?
Yeah, sure. Hello, I'm Dave, Chief Creative Officer at ELSE. So yeah, R&D days, we've been running since we switched to a 4-day week in 2018. We started to form small teams like the Instinctively group, roughly sort of 2, 3, 4 people strong. Every quarter we run a new experiment in a particular area, and those areas all look to explore new technology trends. So in Instinctively's case, it was a lot around the Internet of Things and connected homes, as well as societal needs which come from the team themselves. So we're trying to curate the programme around things that people are really passionate about, but also areas of disruption that we should be advising our clients and really have a bit of an interest in as an experienced design consultancy. So yeah, it's been a really big, long experimental phase of people getting really involved in things that they're very passionate about. We've got 5 projects in a cycle at the moment, and they're all looking at a range of things from digital identity and privacy through to large action models in tourism and certain sort of use cases in different industries. So they're quite far-ranging in subject matter, and that's sort of one of the beauties of R&D really, is that you can explore all these different corners of areas that possibly you wouldn't have the opportunities to do through client commercial work.
Amazing. And so do people kind of volunteer for the different projects that are ongoing? Is there something that comes into the different areas? How do people get involved?
The way we've found sort of really good results is to allow people to come up with ideas that they're really interested in, to pitch in those ideas and let groups form quite naturally around those ideas. So it could be that, you know, there's a particular interest in circularity or education, or in this case sort of healthy ageing through personal experience, and we try and let those groups form quite naturally, and then coach and steer those through. So our leadership team act as kind of quality assurance to those groups and try and coach them through, you know, making sure that it's staying on track and there's we're getting the most out of those projects.
Any challenges in the R&D program in terms of like funding, resources, in terms of like, there must be so many amazing ideas, so I'm just curious to know if there's any challenges you've found.
Well, I think the challenge is everyone wants more time on it. So it happens once a fortnight, and you know, through work that you do, I'm sure when it stop-start, it's quite disruptive. So having that continuity, I think, is always a challenge for everyone. You know, you don't want to wait until that Friday before you're in the zone of R&D, but R&D should feel quite different to the rest of the week. It should feel like a gear change. It should feel, you know, more playful, less kind of serious in that regard, I suppose. So that's certainly one challenge. And then, where we're trying to get things to at the moment is linking up what we are interested in personally with proper outcomes in terms of funding. That Instinctively has been a great example of, you know, seeing this through the Alzheimer's Society and having a proper partnership in place there. All of our R&D projects have potential in terms of that partnership. It's just we're all designers and we're busy. So turning our focus to being a bit more entrepreneurial and startup-like through that is something that I guess we're all kind of going through that learning curve at the moment. But we'll look at opportunities from, you know, within our own client base to government grants, for example, through Innovate UK, where we've had a couple of applications in. That area is quite exciting, but a bit of a challenge as well.
Very exciting. And I just wanted to add, because I'm a designer myself, and I honestly just love to hear this, and having that space to like have projects like this flourish and have, you know, some of these, you know, projects that you don't necessarily get the opportunity within client, as you mentioned, to have that space to just kind of be able to explore. I think that's amazing. And yeah, I'm hoping all the challenges that you hope to take R&D kind of go in the right direction.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting. Gives you a chance to practice skills that maybe you don't get to in day-to-day projects as well. So I can really see the benefits of that. I think that's all the questions that we had. So big thanks for hosting us here and for telling us all about the R&D programme, about Instinctively. It's been really great.